Are years of abuse justification for murder? An Indianapolis woman is on trial in Marion criminal court.
And she is claiming self-defense, but prosecutors are not buying it. Derek Thomas in our newsroom now with more on this story. Derek?
The prosecutors say quite simply the defendant went to the victim's house and killed him. The defense says there's nothing simple about this case. 26-year-old Dawn Ferguson is on trial for murder, but she says it was a case of self-defense. In opening statements, defense attorney Angie Dow said Dawn Ferguson is a victim of domestic violence. She was beaten up, tortured, degraded, and raped by David Armstrong. She stood up for the first time in 7 years. She wasn't going to be raped again. The crime occurred on July 21st, 1998, inside Armstrong's West Side home. Ferguson admits she stabbed her ex-boyfriend in the chest with a steak knife.
He was planning on raping her, as he had done in the past. And, you know, some people think that you can't rape somebody that you have lived with, but in our society, no means no, and she did not want to have sexual intercourse with him that evening.
Armstrong was 6'2", 200 pounds, and Ferguson was 5'2", 120 pounds at the time of the murder. He was arrested at least twice for battery, but those cases were dismissed. Some call this case a classic example of battered woman syndrome. Dawn Ferguson has no prior criminal history. During opening statements, she was wiping tears away from her eyes. She's tried to commit suicide twice. Deanne?
Okay. Derek Thomas, live.
The prosecution calls it murder.
Dawn Ferguson says she was the victim of domestic violence, and the accumulation of attacks and frustration led to the death of her ex-boyfriend, David Armstrong. Derek Thomas is live at the City County building with more on this story. Derek?
Martha, Dawn Ferguson took the witness stand in her own defense. She said the victim taunted her and challenged her to stab him, but she says she didn't mean to kill him. Dawn Ferguson painted a dark portrait of pain and violence. She alleged that murder victim David Armstrong struck her at least 20 times during their 7-year relationship and knocked her teeth out during one encounter. She said the emotional burden caused her to attempt suicide 3 times. In testimony that was charged with emotion, Ferguson said, "I felt worthless. I was tired of him." But under pointed cross-examination, prosecutor Brian Poindexter asked the operative question: "Did you stab David Armstrong through the heart and through the lung with a kitchen knife?" She said yes. And when asked if he was unarmed, she said yes again. Clinical psychologist Dr. Bart Ferraro evaluated the defendant and said she was sexually molested as a child, an alcoholic, and learning disabled. He said she was a passive person, not aggressive. But on July 21st at 4714 West Bertha, she admitted stabbing Armstrong. She said she did it because he was threatening rape. This case will go to the jury tomorrow, and that jury will have a very difficult job. Martha and Kevin?
Okay, thank you very much.
And a Marion County jury is deliberating the fate of a woman charged with stabbing her ex-boyfriend to death. Dawn Ferguson says she was battered by the victim for 7 years and killed him because she feared he would rape her. Derek Thomas is live with more on this case now. Derek?
Clyde, the jury began deliberating 3 hours ago. Closing arguments were passionate on both sides. But 26-year-old Ferguson is accused of killing 28-year-old David Armstrong on July 21st, 1998. She admits stabbing him with a steak knife inside his West Side home, but Ferguson says Armstrong once knocked her teeth out with a blow and struck her 20 times during their 7-year relationship. In closing arguments, prosecutor Brian Poindexter said Mr. Armstrong was a brute, but society doesn't impose a death penalty for punching people in the face, and Dawn Ferguson can't either.
Well, I think she absolutely acted in self-defense. I think that a woman that has been beaten for that many years comes to that night with her perspective, and she knew that she was going to be raped. She knew that she was going to be beaten.
The jury is not only able to consider murder charges, they can consider involuntary manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, and reckless homicide. If they choose reckless homicide, that'll be a victory for the defense because that only carries a maximum penalty of 8 years in prison. Clyde and Dion.
All right, thank you, Derek. The murder trial of a woman who says she fought back from abuse. Within the hour, a jury handed down a guilty verdict for Dawn Ferguson, but her lawyers are still calling it a victory, and that's because the jury found her guilty of a lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter instead of murder. This charge carries a maximum sentence of 8 years. Ferguson's lawyers used battered women's syndrome as her defense for stabbing her boyfriend last year.
And in the past 7 years, she never stood up for herself. And on that night, she did, and she had every right to defend herself. But I think what's important is the verdict found that what she did was intentionally batter him to stop him from what was happening, and that she didn't intend the result, which was that he died.
Ferguson's lawyers say they're going to push to get her out of jail immediately. Instead of serving time, they say she should get counseling. By tomorrow, convicted killer Dawn Ferguson will be out of jail and enrolled in a transitional living program at the Julian Center. She was sentenced today in Marion Superior Court. The sentence can be described as lenient. Derek Thomas joins us now with more on this story. Derek, tell us what happened.
Clyde, Judge Robin Mobley said this was a case that cried out for the mercy of the court, and mercy was granted. 26-year-old Dawn Ferguson was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but all but time served was suspended. Ferguson was convicted last month of stabbing her boyfriend, David Armstrong, to death in July of 1998. But according to the defendant, she absorbed years of abuse by his hand. A jury found her guilty of involuntary manslaughter, not murder. The victim's family was not happy with the sentence.
I think it would have been nice to have her behind bars just for a little bit longer, but I'm glad that she's getting the help that she's going to need. So, I don't know.
Do you think this depreciates?
I think it depreciates his life, that she's not getting more time.
I think it was fair. Dawn needs counseling and, you know, things like that. She'll get all the help she needs in there. And, you know, we're still sorry about what happened to David, and we always will be, but she'll be all right. Everybody will be all right through all this.
Going to the Julian Center shelter and getting into transitional housing, getting substance abuse, all of those things are not going to be easy. She has relied upon alcohol a majority of her life to deal with depression. Now she will have the support that she never got before.
2 jurors, including the jury foreman, asked the judge to be lenient on Ferguson. She was, and now is up to her to justify that fate. Clyde, yeah.
Thank you, Derek.